Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. The left, the Jacobin left, is telling you, and has been actually for some time, but I think more people are paying attention now as they're engaged in redefinition of things like violence and thievery. So let's just understand where we're at. Kevin Williamson caught this from NPR. Racism. Racism as defined by NPR. Racism is the foundation of the society we are in, and to simply carry on with absolutely no active interruption of that system is to be complicit with it. And in that way, we can say that nice white people who really aren't doing anything other than being nice white people are racist. We are complicit with that system. There is no neutral place.
That's why white silence equals violence.
Right.
New signs popping up everywhere.
And what that really is a working definition of totalitarianism. That's what it actually is. So now we've moved from you cannot hold that opinion. You cannot hold a heterodox opinion. You have to conform to the opinion as set forward by the cultural mavens in charge of all of our civic institutions. Now you can't just quietly hold that opinion. You have to voice that opinion. You're not allowed to be silent. You're not allowed to disagree, and you're also not allowed to be silent. That doesn't leave you a lot of options. So when people poo-pooed those conservatives like myself who suggested that for many years, let's just go back a few to the Obergefell decision, since we're talking about the Supreme Court's decision on the Civil Rights Act yesterday. We were earlier in the show. Just go back to the Obergefell decision. You think that tolerance is what they're after. You think just acceptance, equal footing is what they're after. Wrong. You shall conform to their views and celebrate them. Tolerance is acceptance. Those are new synonyms. Celebration is now a synonym with acceptance and tolerance. So to violate one is to violate all. You understand how it works? And by the way, in part because of yesterday's Supreme Court decision, but not exclusive to it, if it hasn't come to your professional work life yet, if it hasn't come to your kids' school life yet, it is coming. And you've been told your silence is unacceptable. So now you got a choice. It's going to be foisted upon you. Just about everybody. So just be aware of it for those who were so skeptical, as, by the way, some conservatives, Jonah Goldbergs of the world, were, redefinition of marriage, no big deal. No big deal. Didn't see the continuum that we're on. Do you see it now? As Matt Taibbi wrote yesterday, or over the weekend, I should say, in this excellent piece on the media, the American press is destroying itself. This is Matt Taibbi, a man of the left, who, by the way, the Jacobins will be coming for. The American left has lost its mind. It's become a cowardly mob of upper-class social media addicts, Twitter Robespierres who move from discipline to discipline, torching reputations and jobs with breathtaking casualness. And despite that, it continues to gain acolytes, or at least useful idiots, doesn't it? Well, look around you in Chicagoland. Do you feel like the reasonable crowd is winning? For more on this, in the context of November 3rd, we're pleased to be joined by former Chicagoan Joel Pollack, who is also the Breitbart News senior editor-at-large. He's got a new book coming out. It's coming out next month, July 14th, so get signed up for early release on that. Red November, will the country vote red for Trump or red for socialism? Joel, thanks for being with us. Appreciate it.
Good to be with you guys.
So how is what we have seen over the last 90 days between the COVID-19 response and the civil unrest that will certainly continue, or both will certainly frame the coming presidential election and all the elections underneath it. How do you think that breaks in terms of acceptance or backlash?
Well, you could have a backlash, and this idea of defunding the police is where the backlash really begins. I don't think you can trust any polls right now because, as you pointed out in your introduction, people are afraid, and they're not going to tell anybody, certainly a stranger, what they actually think about anything. I don't think most Americans agree with what's happening, and as you pointed out, this silence is violence idea is a real threat to our civilization, actually. It's not just a threat politically. It's a threat to the idea that you can live in harmony with people whose ideas are not necessarily the same as your own. If you're forced to express an idea that you don't agree with, then there really is no freedom of speech or freedom of thought. And this confusion about violence is really what's driving a lot of the discourse on the left right now. So on the one hand, they regard silence as violence, but when they actually loot and smash stores and kill law enforcement officers like David Dorn, that's not violence. That's called mostly peaceful. There's been a complete erasure of the distinction between what is actually lawful and legitimate protest versus violence that's used to intimidate other people into submission. So there really is a sense of fear right now in the country, and it's almost a cultural revolution moment. I was one of the first to write about that a couple weeks ago. Maybe I was more in tune with it because Red November is really, in a way, about socialism and about becoming totalitarianism of thought. But this is like a cultural revolution moment. You see young people overthrowing every kind of tradition, every kind of authority, and not really realizing that what they're doing is making the powerful people even more powerful. There's nothing that this is actually going to do to help Black Americans. Much of it will actually hurt Black Americans. And yet if you tell people you have to say Black Lives Matter, and if you don't, you're part of the problem, you can hide from yourself the fact that you're actually damaging a society that allows people to improve their own lives.
Well, Joel, how do you think COVID-19 played a part in this? I mean, you have a lot of people that don't have any sports to play, no school to go to, no jobs to go to, and there was a lot of pent-up frustrations from that. How does that fit into this whole reforming of police?
Well, you ask a great question. And in my book, I actually talk about the coronavirus pandemic and its effect on the election, on the Democratic primary in particular. But there are two ways we're seeing the COVID-19 pandemic affect this current moment. One is that, as you say, people don't have many other things to do. Not only that, but we're subsidizing a lot of people not to go to work. The very generous unemployment insurance benefits that were put into the CARES Act do provide people an incentive not to look for work right now. So we're actually paying for a lot of people, younger people in particular, who could be looking for work, could be starting businesses. We're paying for them not to do anything. And so they are bored, and they're paid to be bored. So they're out there organizing and so forth. But the other thing is, if you look at the effect of the shutdowns, and I'm not asking right now whether the shutdowns were necessary. Maybe they were to prevent the spread of disease. But if you look at the effect of the shutdown, it affected Black and Hispanic employees much more than white employees. And that's not because it was a racist shutdown, but it's because the shutdown affected businesses where minorities are more concentrated than white employees, particularly restaurants, barbershops, car washes. These are parts of the economy where you have a disproportionate number of Black and Hispanic workers. White employees are more likely to work in white-collar fields where you can do some, at least, of your work from home. You can meet on Zoom, you can telecommute via whatever, email and so forth. So you can actually work things out at home. And not that it's been easy for people having to balance family and work life, especially in small apartments in big cities, but people have been able to keep their jobs for the most part. But Black and Hispanic people suffered disproportionately, and they had the additional difficulty of dashed expectations. The unemployment had been the lowest it had ever been for Black and Hispanic Americans. Black poverty was at an all-time low. So you take people who are in the middle of a great economic expansion, opportunity is going up, and there's all kinds of things to look forward to, and then you suddenly take it all away. That causes a kind of frustration that has nothing to do with the police, but all it takes is one incident for people to find some way to express that frustration. And I think that's what we're living with today.
Thinking about November 3rd, it seems to me there's a competition right now in terms of approach to messaging. Joe Biden and the Democrats want to make this a referendum on Trump, and Trump wants to make this a choice, sort of how you framed your book. Red for socialism versus Trump for free markets, or red for socialism versus Trump for law and order. But you've got to make it a choice in terms of what kind of America do you want going forward if you're President Trump. And Joe Biden wants to make it a referendum on Trump's, basically his personality. Do you agree that that's the competition? And if so, who's winning it at present?
Nobody is winning. The American public at the moment, and I'm a fan of President Trump, so take this in the spirit in which it's offered. The American public right now feels as though they have two choices that don't quite meet their needs. On the one hand, you have President Trump, who I think has actually managed the coronavirus and the unrest very well, because he got us through the coronavirus. We had enough ventilators. People weren't dying for lack of hospital access like they did in some other countries like Italy. And on the riots and unrest, he stopped that pretty quickly. The media liked to make fun of that walk through Lafayette Park to the church, but that actually was part of a push toward law enforcement, law and order that worked. That's when things started settling down. So I think he managed it well. The problem is that people feel that the way he pushes back, even though I happen to like it, the way he pushes back tends to encourage or at least provoke people who don't like him. And so he's not ending the conflict in a broader societal sense. And as you pointed out at the beginning of the segment, people still feel like they're under siege from these woke mobs and from political correctness. And even though he's fighting against it, he has not turned that corner yet. That just keeps getting worse. So people feel like you have a president who is provocative, and he's not yet succeeded in calming down the situation, returning it to stability. And, his personality is combative, so those provocations are just going to continue. On the other side, you have Joe Biden, who's sitting in his basement in Wilmington, Delaware, completely incapable of managing anything, including his own campaign. And he's responsible in some ways for some of this division. He ran his campaign. He launched his campaign based on the hoax, based on the lie that President Trump sided with neo-Nazis in Charlottesville, which never happened. But imagine saying that, and he keeps repeating it today, saying that the president is essentially a neo-Nazi in the middle of a race riot. Joe Biden is basically encouraging this division, but he's not really in control anymore. And nobody believes Biden can actually manage any way out of this crisis or any other. What you get if you vote for Biden is the team around Biden, and you get basically Bernie Sanders policies and Barack Obama personnel. So the country's looking at this and saying, how do we really get out of this moment? And what Trump has to do, I think, and I wrote this a few days ago, is he has to get people focused back on the issues of the economy, the infrastructure, healthcare, education. Joe Biden could lead on these issues, but Democrats are so wrapped up in race right now and defund the police that they've actually given Republicans a window of opportunity where Republicans can actually take the lead on healthcare, take the lead on education. These are traditionally issues that people associate with Democrats. But because Democrats are busy talking about systemic racism, which nobody really can even define, Joe Biden has left Trump a little window here where if he can come out with policies that speak directly to the anxieties of Americans as we're getting back to work, worried about health insurance, worried about his schools opening in the fall and all of that, he can actually set the country off back in a new direction where people are thinking about recovery instead of dwelling on the present moment.
He is Joel Pollack, Breitbart News senior editor at large. The book, Red November, Will the Country Vote Red for Trump or Red for Socialism, that comes out July 14th. I suppose you could pre-order it on Amazon if you're so inclined, which you should be, right, Joel?
Right. You can pre-order it on Amazon, Barnes & Noble. Comes out in July, but you can get it just about everywhere already.
Very good. Joel Pollack, thanks for joining us. Good luck with the book.
Thank you, and always great to talk to you, Ben.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
It's like a hot, steaming cup of information to start your day. It's Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
Balance of Nature, changing the world one life at a time.
So I went to the ophthalmologist for my eye exam. I usually go yearly. He says, "What are you doing?" And I told him about Balance of Nature. He said, "Well, whatever you're doing, keep it up."
My primary doctor, she couldn't get over how much better I was doing. She said she'd never seen anything like it.
I hope this is really kicking off because it's been a godsend, I'm telling you. I mean, I'm a pharmacist, and for 2 years, I haven't had a cold. balance of nature.